Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Two Stewards Show. Last episode, we talked about young people in the housing market, how they can get in, some of the financial implications and how-tos, and we want to just talk a little bit about what you do once you actually have the house and how you can make it work. So one of the, and I'm here with Brent, by the way, from...
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Brent. Brent from Good Stewards. And yeah, we've got a few strategies that people probably should keep in mind. And not just once they've bought the house, but before they've bought it, you need to identify the correct kind of unit that you want to buy. And you talked about it last time, right? So some things to look out for. So condos, for example, because they really limit your freedom to do what you want to do, limit the amount of control you have, because there's a condo association. You're going to be paying fees in addition to in addition to your regular mortgage payment. You got the maintenance fees, which, in a house you can probably do that maintenance cheaper by yourself, depending on how handy you are. But yeah, we don't like condos, put it that way. But yeah, it's important to do the work up front to identify, like, what is my strategy going to be once I have this place? Like, how am I actually going to pay for it? And I mean, you need to go through qualification tests at the bank as well. But even then, sometimes it's kind of strained, and you don't want to be house poor and making every last dollar that you have go towards your mortgage payment. So
yeah, the idea is that if a young person's saving up to buy their first home, and they can, let's say they save up the money and they got the down payment, or they got a gift and they finagle that together, and then they found the area they want to invest or whatever, and they want to buy this home, and they qualify for the loan. They got all that figured out, and they're ready to make the purchase. Like, what are some things to keep in mind now? Like, how am I going to actually pay for this mortgage month to month? How am I actually going to make this whole thing work? And is it worth it? Like, before I jump in and actually execute on this whole thing, because I want to buy a house. I know it's a good idea. Everyone says it is. I want to get on the train of the real estate market before it gets away from me. And I've made all these sacrifices to get to this point, but like, now what?
Yeah. So it's a really good idea when you're doing all this thinking to do some pro formas, and especially when you're starting to look at houses.
Pro forma?
It's a pro. So it means for.
I got a whole whack of formas, but none of them are very pro.
Yeah, a regular forma or a pro forma? No, I think it means for the sake of form in Latin. But basically, it's just it could be a spreadsheet, and it just you list out the financial implications and values, like everything that will go into that house, right? So you basically like a little balance sheet for a house.
Right.
So your costs.
That allows you to analyze like the income and the expenses and see whether or not you're going to have positive cash flow at the end of the day or negative cash flow, which you don't want.
Well, I mean, so in this case, we're talking about young people getting into their first home. So it's going to have negative cash flow.
Yeah.
Robert Kiyosaki, I think, made the point that, your personal home is not an asset, it's a liability. There's, I kind of tend to agree with that, but there's ways to make it more of an asset.
Or at least parts of it.
Or at least parts of it, right? And that's, especially with living costs and everything else.
And I like the way Robert Kiyosaki, he's the rich dad, poor dad guy. So I like the way he kind of frames what is an asset, what is a liability. Like he says, an asset is something that puts money in your pocket every month.
Yep.
It's just super simple definition, a little bit simplistic, but a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket every month.
Yeah.
So if you own a home and it doesn't put money in your pocket every month and actually costs you money, then he would determine that to be a liability. So like you said, your primary residence or your first home might be a liability because you're going to have to pay all these expenses. So anyways.
Yeah, no, you're right. And like, you have to be comfortable with that, right? Because there's a value to having your own home and to your lifestyle and so forth. So for your first home, that's cool. But there's ways to make that, to lessen that liability, especially as, first-time home buyer, young folks. So we want to talk about some of those strategies. But you need to identify what strategy you're going to be using before you buy that place so you get the right place. Because if you buy the wrong place, you won't be able to do what you're hoping to do. So some of these things could include...
And these are the things you're going to do just to make it work, you mean? Like, you're going to buy this house and you got to come up with a strategy of how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to, what are the ways that I can generate income from the property or whatever, just to be able to afford to own the house ongoing.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're, if your strategy is to duplex a house, well, then clearly you're going to look for a house that you can duplex. And normally, within
the
our neck of the woods, that means it's got a basement, right? Not every house in North America has a basement, and you can still duplex them, but you need a different, little bit of a different setup. So where we are, it would be like, okay, then you need a basement. And when we bought our first place, my wife and I, that was my only stipulation. I didn't care about anything else, how it looked or whatever, but it was like it has to have a basement apartment that we can rent out. And I wasn't like in an investing frame of mind or interested in real estate as an investment, but I just kind of knew intuitively, like, we want to keep our costs down. Having a basement apartment that pays some rent is really going to help us out. So that was an example of where, that determined the kind of house that we bought and the kind of house that we even looked at, right? We let our real estate agent know this is what we want and just save a lot of time in the process. So you need to identify that and have a longer view as well. So last episode you talked about accessory dwelling units, for example, and I love that whole portion that you talked about, with land value and size of the lot and all that kind of thing, right? So if you think that in the future you might want to build an accessory dwelling unit, like intensify the density of your property, then you need to look for something that has a little more property where you could actually build another unit or maybe 2 units or, whatever it is that you're thinking of. Even if you're not thinking of it, having extra land in the city is always valuable because if you sell you don't have to do the work, but you could sell that house and sell that property to someone who will densify it and build the accessory dwelling unit.
So your comment with all of that is mainly that before you buy the house, you're mindful of this. If that's going to be your strategy, you're going to look for that particular house. So maybe you can just give an idea of what are some of the strategies that work today that are relevant for young people, that are attainable. Because I think some strategies like, okay, Mark, I can't afford to build 5 units on my property. I can't even afford to buy a house. Well, that's true, right? But so what could work? And what's maybe the stepping stones, right? Like, how do I get to that level?
Sure. There's a few things that I can think of. Maybe sort of in order from like easiest to hardest, right? So the easiest thing would be just to do room rentals where you live in one room. And so in this example, I'm just saying you're a young married couple buying your first home. So you live in one room. You live in the whole house, but you have a room that's yours. And then maybe you've got 2 other bedrooms that you rent out. Or it could be a scenario where you've bought the house with friends and you share the living space. You got to be good friends. And if you're going to do something like that, a joint venture like that, you absolutely have to have a contract. I don't care how solid your friendship is. Have a contract that has very clearly defined exits.
Yeah, exit clause.
Yeah.
How do I get out of this?
If it ever comes down to it, if you're fighting about one thing, this is something you don't have to fight about because it's clearly delineated. You know that, either I buy you out, you buy me out, we sell it, like whatever it is, get it in writing so that it's, there's just, so that and that can also forestall some arguing as well because you know exactly what the outcome is going to be.
And that's if you buy it together, right?
Yes.
We both put money in, we both go on title or whatever the case. But you could use room rentals kind of if you own it yourself, single guy or whatever, and you buy a house, you rent out a bunch of rooms and, they don't have ownership. They're not paying into the more, they're not paying in as owners, but they're just paying you rent to live there.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you could afford that scenario, that's better because you've got somebody else. We talked about that earlier, third party pay down, somebody else paying down your mortgage. while you still retain 100% of the equity. Whereas if you're buying it with friends, that's 50-50. So, I mean, you do what you got to do, right, to get in. But that's one option. And as we look at sort of demographics in Canada, there's so many international students coming into Canada, and they're going to be in the urban areas. So if you're in an urban area, there's lots of opportunity to do a room rental. And, that not just the students, because obviously they're coming in, but the amount of immigrants is putting pressure on everybody in the rental market. So I've seen in our markets anyways, much more common for room rentals, and seeing a lot more ads for that, where it's just regular folks, but they can't afford even the full cost of rent because maybe they got a minimum wage job. So renting a whole house is just out of reach for them, right? So that's one option is the room rentals or buying with a friend. Another option would be a duplex. And yeah, maybe I'll just kind of list these, right? So we got duplex, we have multifamily, so that would be a triplex or a fourplex. That's getting, a little bit harder to do. Accessory dwelling unit we mentioned. That's sort of probably a future thing. Once
meaning like a detached dwelling unit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that would be like maybe there's a garage on the property, and you could convert that with some work into a place for someone to live, or maybe there's enough room on the property where you could build a unit or 2 units or whatever in the back, like a laneway house, popular example as well. Another, I guess, sort of the final thing we'd be thinking about would be just buying somewhere else that's more affordable. And I've got a pretty good example of that as well. So, I guess duplex is the is sort of the next one on the list, right? That's an option. And again, that's what we did. We bought a place with a basement apartment, and right away we had an income stream to help cover the cost of the mortgage. So, I don't know. Like, so this is something you do a lot of, right? Is taking regular houses and making them into duplexes. I know you do other things, but that's like a pretty popular option, right? So I don't know if you want to walk through sort of some of the processes around that. Yeah.
So, first of all, there's a certain type of house that works and is suitable for that, and that, like we talked about, not buying condos, not buying a townhouse. So part of the reason why I would just say not to buy those particular things is because it doesn't lend itself well to duplexing, like adding units. So the type of home that you look for when you're looking for something where you can add a basement dwelling unit, generally that's what it is has a certain square footage in the basement. You don't want to have something that's too small. Then it's not worth putting in all the effort to add a kitchen and whatever. So you want a decent number of square feet. Obviously you need ceiling height. You need egress windows. And there's a whole list of different things that you need, right? So when you're shopping around for a house, it definitely pays to do the research and before you actually buy. But the strategy itself is I think it's probably one of the room rentals is easy because you just buy a house turnkey. Usually don't need it to be legally converted to anything. It doesn't need to be altered significantly. Maybe you just need to paint the walls and you can start renting rooms out and you can share the common space, and that works. And that's going to allow you to bring in some rent money and be able to pay the mortgage and the bills. But duplex really allows you to have it's kind of the first way of allowing you to have a third party in your home while you live there, and then you kind of have 2 separate spaces, and you can pay the bills that way. And then that way, if somebody moves out, you can rent it to someone else, and you don't really have to be friends. You don't have to share common spaces so much. So that option is attractive for young people, especially because you have to make sacrifices, but it's not for a young family. It's not like you have people living in your house sharing common space. So if you're married and you have a kid or whatever, you could very easily live in the basement. And I think a lot of people there's this like stigma around living in basements generally, but if you can make it work where you can rent out the main floor of your house and you can live in the basement, like it gets you so much further ahead. And it is a decrease in your standard of living in a sense, because it's not going to be the greatest basement unit. But it is
unless you built it.
Yeah, unless it's expensive, I guess. But the delta, like the difference in income that you would get on the main floor versus the basement unit, like it could be $400, $500, $600 depending on what the size is, right? So I generally try to steer young people to sacrifice now, live in the basement while you can, and while your family's small, or while you have maybe your lifestyle's not so geared around the home. It's more like, I got to go to work, I got to go here and there, and like live in the basement for a while and rent out the main floor. So that strategy works really well for that, right?
Yeah, and you could like looking at rents, you can probably won't cover the entire mortgage, but if you're renting out the main floor, you can cover like a hefty portion of it, which really frees up a lot of resources, month to month for you. Yeah.
So this is what my wife and I did as well when we bought our first home that we wanted to live in. So we had an investment property already operating for a couple of years while we were renting, and that was rented up and down. But then when we bought our first home that we wanted to live in, we lived in the basement, and it was very poor quality. We ended up trying to improve it, right, and make some renovations while we lived there. And we actually went through the process to legalize it, to make it 2 legal units. But the whole time, like from the minute we moved in, we rented the main floor out right away. I think we did some very minor things right away to kind of put laundry up there for the tenant. Mm-hmm. But we got it rented out. And, the nice thing about that is like, yeah, he's paying for part of your bills, or a significant portion, like you said. And now I have a bit of extra cash to buy 2x4s to frame out my basement walls or whatever you need, right? So it's kind of redundancy, right? Like if you have a bad day at work, you don't make the money you need to, maybe you lose your job, like all these things happen, right? Or like something happens and you don't have the cash, like at least you get a good chunk from the main floor that can tie you over for a month or two, right?
Yeah.
So, it definitely helps set you on the right track as a young person getting started.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on something you said there. You said you bought your first place and you continue to rent. So you had the investment property, mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that was like a 20% down.
It was, we actually did, I think it was 7%. Like we just decided a number that we wanted to put down. But yeah, it was as low. We could go as low as 5%. We put 7%. I think it was just a round
so
number.
Using a first-time home buyer's plan.
Yeah.
Right. But then you still lived somewhere else.
Yeah.
And,
so I think I was living at home for the first little bit.
Yep.
Because I got married the following year, so it was like 6 months later we got married. But then we had a place lined up to rent. So we tried to rent below our means, and we got a very nice place, but it was through some connections that we had. We knew somebody, and they said, "Oh, like you can rent here." So the idea was that we wanted this property. We kind of never really intended to live in it. It was going to be an investment property, but we had to live somewhere, so we had to find a place to rent. We just chose to rent in the cheapest place we could find, and it was a bit of a drive. Like it was an extra 20-minute drive, 30-minute drive to work.
Yeah.
But it definitely financially set us off on a better track. So.
Yeah. So that is a great option too, right? Buying, and if if the delta between your rent and what it would cost you to live in the house and the rent that you're getting, maybe, especially now, where rents are headed, if mm-hmm. you bought a duplex, that could probably pay for your rent somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, especially for younger folks, you don't need all the space. Like that is an excellent option, because now you're getting the house paid for, you're getting your rent paid for, or at least a good portion of it, and you're building equity.
Yeah, and the nice thing is, like, where this house was for us, like I could drive by it every day on the way to work. If something happened, I could go there, and then, on the weekend or spare time, like if I wanted to fix the garden beds or do whatever improvements, I could go there and work on my own house that I owned.
Yeah.
That was a rental and improve the value. So yeah, it definitely worked out really well for us anyways.
Yeah. So that is a great option. And that's, I talked about that sort of further down the list, but we'll bring it up now, right? Of buying somewhere you can afford. So, and in this case, that was in the same city or the same area for you. But I have a brother-in-law who was also looking at getting into the market, and the area we're in was just crazy and getting crazier. And this was sort of leading up into the COVID times, where it was just unattainable. But they were able to buy in a different province, get their first home, and then they rented it out. So they still lived here. They rented out that home. And that worked out pretty well. They had some family there to kind of keep an eye on that house. So that, that went into that decision as well. Like, we know we have somebody trusted who can kind of look after the place. And that was sort of how they got into the market. And then eventually they moved out there. They were able to do some renos, a little bit of equity growth. Were able to move into a bigger property and then kind of repeat the process, add a basement apartment, rent that out. And they just wouldn't have been able to do that in Hamilton, in the area that we're in, because house prices. So, that's, again, I mentioned it last episode, we say that to young people, like, just get in. And that was their way to just get in. And yeah, it may not be exactly what you envisioned or what you were looking for, but I think we're everything we're talking about, there's a common theme of like, yeah, you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit of what you were hoping for initially. Right?
Yeah, and you said, so they moved to a different province, but did they know anybody there? Yeah. So then that probably helps with that decision. I think for people, maybe they're living in Ontario and maybe they look in Alberta and, hey, I could buy a house there for a lot cheaper, but I don't want to move there. Well, there are options to be able to buy things without actually having to move, right? Like the strategy of actually making an investment in a piece of property that someone else manages for you. And then you can rent where you want to live, but try and find obviously a cheaper place or something, but at least you do own something. So that strategy works as well. And we've helped people out do that. Where, people come to us all the time and say, I have this much money and what can I afford? I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like, you can't really afford anything in Southern Ontario because like the reality is, if you want to buy a rental property, you got to put 20% down and that doesn't work. So, but for people who want to still buy something and get in the market, like they can go to, a different province, a different country even, if you want to invest in the States, and you can at least still buy something and you can start building equity, you can start paying down a loan and live somewhere. You don't have to live in your investment essentially, right? So it doesn't really help with the aspect of like, hey, I want to on the weekend fix something up or I want to do some improvements to my property. That doesn't really happen when obviously you got to get on a plane to fly your building materials out to a different province. But it is a way to build equity, right? And it could be a short term. I'll say short term. It could be like a 5 or 10 year thing, right? Where we just buy this thing, we sit on it for 10 years, we rent here for 10 years, and maybe we can sell it in 10 years, and then we'll have a decent amount of money through the appreciation of that property to buy something where we actually want to live and settle down. So for someone in their 20s, early 20s, mid 20s, it could be a 5 to 10 year strategy, right? To get to home ownership where you want to be. And that takes a lot of sacrifice, but it's doable. So
yeah, and in this case, they ended up moving in there, but that was just kind of happenstance. That wasn't the plan. It was meant to be an investment property. And then in terms of, fixing the place up, you can't just fly down there on the weekend, but what they actually did was they went down there for a little while, initially when they bought the place, and had a little bit of help from family, but were able to work on the place and do not extensive renos, but, a decent amount to where it immediately lifted the value of the property. and then they were able to fly back. And, you're talking about a week or 2 weeks, I
Yeah.
think. So it is possible, right? If you're willing to put in some of that work yourself, or, you can have a contractor do it as well and kind of supervise from afar, but that's assuming you've got that cash ready. And here we're talking about like where you can't afford where you are. So you may not do that, but the option for you to actually go, you can go change out the flooring. You can paint some of these things that are pretty easy to do, but will possibly raise the value. And even if you're not doing a lot of equity increase, rental in value can increase, right? A place that's a little bit tired as opposed to a place with new flooring and new paint can be a pretty significant difference in rental values. So that's that is a good option, right? And it gets them into the market, and it gets them growing equity to where their money is now working for them instead of their money having them having to earn their money twice. You mentioned in
when we talked
previous episode.
Yeah, it helps to have a bit of grit too, right? To understand that, hey, I'm
like
young.
Sandpaper?
80 grit.
Yeah.
60 grit. I don't know. Grit as in like, get your hands dirty. But yeah, it helps to have that kind of energy, right? When you're young, you can kind of take it, right? Like if something happens, like whatever, it's not going to make or break your life. You can recover. You have a bit of time, hopefully a lot of time. But yeah, you can make mistakes quicker. You can put yourself out there more and try things that you might not otherwise would have if you're more mature down the road when you have a family depending upon you.
More to lose.
Yeah, a lot more to lose. So some of these strategies, like when you mentioned room rentals off the top, like I wouldn't be interested in that where I am right now. No. Like, wife and kids, I want privacy. I want my own space. Like the financial benefits of renting rooms in my house or whatever, or even if a separate part of my house, but if it was like the basement, but it was still attached, it still doesn't appeal to me.
No.
But that's because I have a family, we're past that kind of stage, right? But we're like, when you're young and you can get your hands dirty and you're, like grit, tenacity, you're trying to make things happen. Like, maybe you say it's for a year, guys, and then you're out. But, hey, like enjoy that time and make it work for you, make it work for them. Like a lot of the times if you're renting a room, like it's going to be affordable rent for the guy renting, and it's going to move the needle for you as well. So, but yeah, there is benefits and drawbacks to everything, but that definitely gets you ahead. So
yeah, and that's why I mentioned it specifically for young folks, because let's say I've already disparaged universities, but let's say
did you go to university?
I did actually. But let's say you've just come back from school, right? Who do students live with? Other people.
Yeah.
Right. So you're kind of used to that, and it's not a big transition to go from like living in res or living, off campus in a house that you share with a bunch of other students to living in a house that you own and living with a bunch of other students or just a bunch of other young folks. Whereas now, I could never rent out rooms to people. I did that for a little bit, like shared a house with a bunch of other guys, and like drove me crazy.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine now that I'm older and more set in my ways that wouldn't work. But you said something earlier about maybe it was a previous episode, but where you might be that young person with the house, and instead of going out golfing or whatever with your buddies, you're working on the house. Like hopefully you've got a friend group that is in a similar situation, and you all help each other, because I've seen that where people are doing even bigger renos, but they've got enough friends who are sort of in the same situation that it's like an Amish barn building, right?
Yeah, that's right? Pretty cool.
You're going to help your buddy with his flooring or his reno or whatever, and that he's going to help you later when it's excuse me, your turn. And I've even done that now later in life where there's a few people and we're all kind of with the same mindset. So like, come help me for a couple of Saturdays or whatever, and then when it's your turn, I'm going to come help you, and that works out. That works out pretty well.
Yeah, I was just thinking actually, like, hey, if some young person wants to buy a house and they don't really know which house to buy or, need advice, like, Mark and I are here to help. We're curious. We're interested in where people are at and we want to help. So, we happy to kind of provide advice and guidance if need be. And like based on our expertise and experience, if that's the right direction you should be going or make some advice. So hopefully the episode, like, these last bunch of comments we've made is going to steer people in the right direction to begin with. But if there's specific questions, like, feel free to reach out to the show or hit us up so that you can get those answered before you make the biggest financial decision of your life, one way or the other, for the better,
absolutely.
For the worse.
I love nothing more than yelling at young people and telling them what they're doing wrong. So
yeah, don't go to university. What else? Get in the trades. Get a piece of real estate. And,
exactly. Just get a 2x4 and start beating you with it, and actually help you make the right decisions.
Oh man, how old are your children?
And you also said something else too about, when you're young, you have more capacity to absorb mistakes, right? What might really set you back later in life may not be so bad earlier on in life, and that even applies to, like, if you're painting your own place and you do a bad job, like, that's practice, sort of. And even the example I gave earlier with my brother-in-law, he had also helped us with, our place, rental properties. And
so he made all the mistakes on your
house. And he said it too, like, oh, it's
and
your place.
And he flew to a different province and beautiful results over there.
Yeah, so, like, help other people out, get the practice, and
hey, that's not a bad idea because, if you're renting at your buddy's house and you can make all the mistakes on his house and what to do, then, when it comes to your house, you'll have figured it all out.
Hopefully. So there's a couple other things we got to talk about too, and just quickly, like, we talked about duplex, but there's also the possibility, and I think it's harder in Canada to do this than in the States, but triplex, fourplex. I think above 4, you're getting into commercial financing, so that's tougher. But if you're in sort of that little sweet spot, if you can swing it, talk to a mortgage agent. If you can get like a triplex or a place that you could convert into a triplex or even a fourplex, like, there's even more opportunity there now to do better with your money, right? To make essentially have yourself living rent-free.
That sounds unattainable, but I think if you look on the outlying areas surrounding, like, the GTA, as you go further away, or like in I don't say rural, but like, in smaller towns, like, some of these buildings, they're probably more set up for that, and you can definitely make the numbers work in terms of purchase price a lot easier there than in the city. So if it's your first home, like you said, it's kind of hard in this area to pick up something with 3-4 units. But if you start looking further and further out, and make the sacrifice with your commute, or even if you can own it and rent out all the units and rent somewhere else.
Or just, go have an adventure and live in Sudbury or whatever, right? If you're young, like, now's the time to do it. Yeah. Right. When you're more settled into a career or with kids in school and all that stuff, you don't want to be uprooting them. But, if you're early 20s and you can do it, like, why not? Go have fun. I mean, responsible fun, but, go do something a little bit, a little crazy.
Yeah.
So I think we kind of talked about most of the more common types of housing that you can buy and what you can do with them to really help you pay the rent, pay the mortgage, and just to make it sustainable month to month, so that you can just get prepared for the future. I want to talk though a little bit about the types of rent or the strategies that you can use, because we're on sort of different ends of that, right? You are pretty firmly into long-term rentals, and we're pretty firmly into short-term and mid-term rentals. So, Yeah, I don't know if you have any tips for like when you're getting set up, if you're looking at a place, whether it's any of these ones that we talked about, like a duplex, for example, getting ready for long-term rent. Any tips around that?
Yeah, so maybe some comments just around tenants in general. Like it is a big fear for a lot of people. Like, oh, I got this house, I finally saved up and I bought this thing, and I got it's a big investment, right? And now all of a sudden I gotta rent it out to people that I don't know. Or so on that note, I would probably say like renting to somebody that you do know, especially if it's like a room rental or like something where they're sharing common areas with you, and that's going to be probably the best approach. Someone that family, friends, church members. That's almost a no-brainer. But if it's a legal unit in your basement or your main floor, and you're living in the basement or the main floor, the other unit, you probably are going to be advertising this unit, and you're probably going to be getting applications from people. So it takes a bit of work to figure out how to do that. And like for myself, I think the first time I ever did it, I used the agent who helped me buy the house. So it just so happened that when we bought the house, they actually had a call from a guy who was moving. He was in the RCMP or something, and he was moving for work to the area, and he wanted a place, and they kind of lined it up so that when I bought the house, he was ready to move in. And it worked out quite well. But then I had to fill the basement after that, separate unit. So yeah, there's different approaches in terms of getting someone to rent your space, but yeah, there's a lot to be mindful of. And because with Airbnb, I understand there's probably some checks and balances, but with long-term rentals, we're once you have a tenant, you're kind of governed by the landlord-tenant board. Mm-hmm. It is a little bit different if it's your primary residence, because if you live there, I guess you could take over the whole house, and
you got to prove that you really
prove. So if you have if you're going to be living in the space and you can justify and prove that you're going to be doing that, then you can kick them out. But generally speaking, if it's a separate space and you want to get someone out, it's a little bit more challenging. So obviously you want to be proactive on the front and to try and find the right people and go about the process the right way. So at our company, like at Good Stewards, we have quite an extensive marketing and tenant screening process that we've kind of developed over the years. And it works quite well for what we want to, who we're trying to attract and what we're trying to do. But for the average person, the big thing is who are you trying to attract to this space, right? Is it going to be somebody who wants, would you live in that space, first of all? Because I've seen units where people own the house, they live there or whatever, and they're like, I would never live in this unit. I'm like, well, do you expect any tenant to ever want to live in this unit and pay you money to live here, right? So first of all, you want to make your unit attractive to the right kind of clientele, right? Who, if they stay there for a significant period of time, you would be content with that. And then, obviously, we're all governed by the same, here in Ontario anyways, we're governed by the same land, the lease agreement, standard lease agreement. So, you can find that online, and, we can even probably put a link to it. But yeah, that's standard for everybody. And you just fill it out with, your information. But, in between, advertising and signing the lease, obviously there's a lot of due diligence you have to do. So, there's different methods of processing tenants, and I don't know what the process is in short term, but in long term, you can do it yourself. You can actually call references, you can do credit checks, you can have a form and people fill out and give you all their information. And there's certain information you can't ask for privacy, but there's a lot that you can get, and you can get a good picture of people's financial situation, what they spend their money on, and would they be a good tenant to pay the rent. But then you can even do a criminal background check and all these different things. But there's also services like online services. I don't even know off the top of my head, Neighborly and
Single Key
and different kind of tenant screening services. So you pay a fee, and then you can have them screen the tenant for you.
Yeah.
So that works if you're not familiar with the whole process. So that's a couple pieces of advice there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we could, I think, and maybe we should do another episode just on tenant screening.
Yeah.
Because, there's you said it's something you've developed over the years, right? So it's not something you just
we've made mistakes. Well, yeah, because there's different layers, and maybe, we'll talk about that in a different episode, but there's different layers to screening. There's the, the initial kind of sniff test side where, you're not actually getting an application, but you're judging, I don't say you judge someone's character, but yeah, you definitely get a first impression, right? And when you meet them at the home and the level of respect they have for you and stuff, you can right away get a sense. And oftentimes what it is gleaning information about whether or not, and gleaning information about them and then checking that against and referencing it against information that they write down in an application or they submit later on.
Yeah.
Say, hey, do these line up? And is this person telling the truth? So yeah, anyways, we'll talk about that. But so that's kind of in a nutshell, the tenant screening process for a young person who wants to get into a long-term rental, just to consider. So maybe, I don't know, you want to talk about short-term and how that differs and what people can do. What are their options in that realm?
Yeah, for sure. I will just say on the long-term side, there's a lot that goes into it, and maybe you want to get some help, whether that's from a professional property manager or a service like Single Key. I myself am not a fan of using realtors to find tenants because I don't know.
Their incentive is to find a tenant. Their incentive is not to find the best tenant, or generally speaking, right?
Exactly.
Unless they're working with you ongoing year over year.
Yeah.
And
it's not really their expertise either, right? They're selling homes. So I don't want to, I know some great realtors, but personally, I would not recommend using them for tenant placement. But yeah, professional property manager, there are people who will just do tenant placements for you and they'll charge a fee, but that's all they do. And that's, if you're a little intimidated by the whole process, I recommend doing it yourself, but if you don't want to, there's options.
Yeah, we do fill units for people from time to time, but we generally, we like to stick with units that are for our investors that we've worked on that, for the reason that we know the clientele we're trying to attract. And it can be a real headache to try and fill units that are not necessarily the same quality. And so.
Yeah, no, it's true. And you also it's the same for short-term rentals. You need to identify ahead of time before you even have the place, who do I want to rent to? And then you have to build or or buy a place that is suited towards that ideal tenant or guest in the case of short-term
So
rentals.
I'm just thinking a young person's going to buy a house, and then let's say they're going to live in the basement and they want Airbnb or short-term rental, the main floor.
Yeah.
Right away, they have to think about, what am I going to do with this main floor? Who's going to rent that?
Well, even before they've bought the house, if they know we want to do short-term rentals, then you got to figure out okay, number one, so for young folks, they're probably more limited geographically, right? Investors, more seasoned investors, you need to identify markets that are going to work. But if this is your first place, you're not buying somewhere else. You're buying where you live, kind of, or you're going to be in a place that is, generally constrained by where you work and where family is and stuff. So then you need to do the research to make sure that is this a suitable market for short-term rentals? Do I have the ability to have a short-term rental just in terms of legislation and regulations by the city? And generally, if you have if your primary residence, in most places, even where there is legislation in place, you're okay to do that. And that can be in your favor. So in Hamilton, for example, they've passed legislation that says it can only be a primary residence. So that could be a tenant renting out part of their place, but it could also be an owner. As long as you live there, you can rent out part of your place or an accessory dwelling unit. And that's actually beneficial for people who are doing this kind of house hacking because it limits the amount of competitors right? Providing
totally.
that everybody actually abides by those rules. But we have seen, like, even already a lot of investors get out of the short-term market in Hamilton.
Yeah, selling off furniture. And
Selling their houses, all this stuff, or converting to a different kind of type of rental. But, I mean, with long-term rentals, generally if you've got an area that has rentals and people who need to live somewhere, you're going to be okay to get the place rented out. And, you got to figure out, like, is this strictly a university town, or is it a place that's a little more diverse? Then I can have my pick of renters a little bit more, like, once they apply, right? And what's that rental market like? But yeah, with short-term rentals, you really need to identify the avatar because, and when I say avatar, that's your ideal guest, because that's typically what you're going to specialize in.
Yeah, I feel like that's like the common is hospitality, right? Like you're in the hospitality industry now. Whereas rental, like you said, as long as there's people, like people need a place to live. Yep. So long-term rental, like as long as there's population trends that are in your favor and there's, excess demand for housing, which there is in this area, you're going to have tenants. But in your case, like you're appealing to a certain kind of guest or audience that you have to be hospitable to them. You have to show them that like this is an experience, or this is the reason why you want to stay here, because they're not going to be living there for their life, right?
Yeah. It's so in the case of long-term rentals, the tenants need you.
Yeah.
In the case of short-term rentals, you need the guests.
Yeah.
So
you have to appeal
flipped.
to them.
Yeah. So there's more marketing. There's a lot more thought that goes into it. So you need to figure out the kind of guest that is going to work in that area and that you want to specialize in. And especially if you end up getting more short-term rentals, it's always best to specialize in a subset, whether it's families or it's people traveling for work or whatever it is. You can get other people into your places, but you really want to specialize in an ideal guest, and then you tailor your place or your places towards them. And again, if other different types of people rent, that's fine, no problem. But you want to do the best job you can for ideally the people who are going to pay the most amount of money in that market.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it through the lens of a young person who might bought their first home and they want to rent it out. Like a long-term rental strategy would be kind of just, it's dependable. You got a tenant, he's going to come, he's going to pay his rent, he's going to be there for however many years. Maybe eventually you take over the whole house and you call it your own, or you move out and you rent the other unit out long term. Mm-hmm. So it's a good strategy. But with short-term rentals, one of the advantages could be that like if you are home quite frequently, you can manage a lot more. Mm-hmm. So you could take on the cleaning. You could kind of earn those fees, so to speak, right? And it can be a little bit more lucrative. If you're in the right area, if you do all the right things, Mark says, listen to Mark's wisdom. Call him up, give him, pick his brain. But yeah, if you do that, the benefits are kind of all yours too, right? Because you're on site all the time. You can, you can maintain the place, keep it up, and
and it can be pretty lucrative. Like for a lot of the time, with just a little 1-bedroom basement apartment, we actually paid our mortgage for the whole house with just that little thing, which you can't do on the long-term rental side.
Yeah.
Now, it's more work, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's, you have to be okay with sharing your house with other people, even if they're not living, like, it's a separate unit, but they're in and out, right? And you'll see them, they're around.
Yeah.
So it helps to have the mindset of being hospitable or, meeting strangers and so forth. That certainly helps if you're going to pursue that kind of strategy, right?
Yeah.
Now there's another strategy as well, which is midterm, and that's a whole sort of different subset of people that are that you're renting to, and that's a 30-day or longer stay. So it could be a month, it could be 6 months. So again, that's a whole different type of person that you're marketing to. And you really need to sort of figure that out. And you can sometimes do a hybrid model, but you need to make sure your place, your space works for that, where maybe in the busy times, so let's say here it would be the summer, right? You're going to do short-term rentals because you're going to get premium room rates. There's events happening. There's people actually coming to visit.
Right. And then in the winter, off season, you kind of get somebody renovating their house and they need a place to live for 6 months.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the, another, I guess, advantage to Airbnb, and then if you live there yourself, could be, you have family coming down, you need a place to crash. Like we just block off those days, right?
Yeah.
And so like it is your own home and it's furnished with presumably your own furniture.
Yeah.
But you can use the space at will, or you can rent it out at will. And if you're on a short-term strategy, like that opens up opportunities to kind of enjoy the space while you're also making money off of it.
Yeah.
On the other days when you don't need it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas long term, like it's kind of set it and forget it, right? Long term is like, I got the person that I want. I'm like, we have a happy, good relationship. We have a thing going on. We just set it and forget it. And with short term, like it is a lot more involved and active. So
yeah, and long term is typically, when people talk about passive income or passive, and it's never totally passive, but is much more passive than short term. Short term is like active involvement in your.
So then the next step, I guess, is like the guy's got the house. He's got it rented out. He picked his strategy. He made the decision. He bought the house. And now, what's the next step? Like he's, I guess this is where we get into the BRRRR acronym, where that's a pretty common term, but, buy, renovate, rent, refinance. You get to the last part, right? Where, say a young person has gone through all the steps. Now, what do they do to move to the next? Like, what's the next stepping stone? I think that would be to like, as you pay down equity, to access that equity to make your next move. And that's something to consider as a young person when you're getting into this, is that, as your tenants and yourself together are paying down your mortgage, obviously that goes in your pocket, the principal portion of it. The home value likely over time will be rising.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about that a lot with the monetary inflation aspect to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then for various reasons, the home values will go up over time. And then you get some of the tax benefits of that as well, because if you have, even if you live in portion of the home, and you're renting out portion of it, you can still have tax benefits from that. So then at a certain point, you can access that equity. And so if you put 5% down, it might take longer to get up to a percentage that makes sense to like start pulling money back out.
Yeah.
Because usually on a refinance, the bank's only going to give you up to 20%.
That's right.
Or you're going to have to maintain 80. Yeah, they'll give you 80% of the value of the home. So if you bought it, let's say for 500, it went to like 800. They'll give you 80% of 800. But let's say you put 5% down at 500, like, you got a ways to go to get back in the black. So, but what are you going to do with that money, right? And that's the next stepping stone, I guess, for people to consider before they jump into all this is, can I use that money to renovate to get to the next step? Like maybe you want to just rent rooms out for the first 2 years, and then you're going to refinance, and then you're going to turn it into a legal duplex, triplex, whatever. Maybe you're going to turn it into a legal duplex right away while you live there in the basement and figure it out. And you're going through these stepping stones, you're saving up, and then in 3, 4, 5 years, you can refinance and you'll have enough equity to be able to put a backyard suite in, or to maybe you can use that to buy a different property, right? So, keeping, like, once you get into that track, like all kinds of options open up. And that's part of the reason why I don't like condos or things like that, because like, hey, you can't do some of these opportunities. Like basically your option is sell. Yeah. Like you can refinance and buy something else if you really like where you're living, but So definitely think about that. And I think like a lot of people are focused on, what am I going to do tomorrow? What am I going to do next year? But like, they're not thinking 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 30. Like I think my problem is I think long-term too much. I don't think about the here and now as much, but
that's not your only problem, Ben.
Yeah. One of my big problems. But yeah, like if you have a shorter term mindset, you kind of neglect, and like time happens so fast, like 10 years goes by. And if you don't have a house versus having a house, and if you have a house, but you don't have tenants in it, like versus you do, like the financial implications of whatever track you set for yourself are huge. So thinking about the exit strategy, so to speak, like on your starter home, on something that you buy, the first one that you pick, making a wise decision, and then understanding, how am I going to get out of this? Like, am I going to live here forever? Am I going to want to live here forever? Like, what do I want to do after this? Like, and set yourself up for an exit strategy that makes sense. And that's especially relevant if you're partnering with somebody, right? Like if you have, like you mentioned it earlier, having an exit clause, having a contract. But yeah, if you're going in financially with another person, clearly define where you're going to get out of this and what that's going to look like, and where you are going to be financially at the end of that deal and that process, right?
Yeah.
So all kinds of crazy things to think about.
Well, so there's two things just before we wrap up about BRRRRs that I want to mention. So the one R you didn't mention was repeat. That's the last R of.
There's so many R's.
How many R's there? I always miss one.
You only got 3 written down here.
Like it's like pirates. There's a lot of R's. Is your dad joke for the day? But yeah, no. That the last R is repeat. Right? You can do this whole process. You renovate, you rent, you refinance, and then you do it again. And that is the beauty of this model, where you can turn that one house into multiple houses, right? It's the repeat. And it's a proven strategy. We've seen people do it. I've done it. I think you've done it, where you take that first property and you don't have additional capital, but you build it up in the property over time and use that to get another one.
Yeah. So even for people who aren't interested in that, like who just want a property.
Yeah.
It's like, even if you're not going to repeat and get another property, like at least you have options, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, not everybody's going to want to just grow a big real estate portfolio, but yeah, people might look at it and say, oh, like, I don't even want to start. Well, if you do, then, now you have like whatever, you could have $100,000 that you could start your own business, right? Like, so yeah.
Yeah, and I get it. Not everybody wants to be like a real estate magnate with a huge portfolio, but just imagine if you're young folk. I'm going to go with that. If you're a young folk,
young buck,
imagine what retirement would look like if you had 3 or 4 properties. Right? It doesn't have to be huge. That's something you can manage yourself. But if you were in, it's totally possible just using equity from your first home, right? And I find usually when people when they go, they don't just stop at like 2 properties or whatever, right? Then they kind of realize like, oh, wow, I'm building wealth, and maybe I don't have to work at this T4 job until retirement because I can use this to help me. And if you're uncomfortable, like my wife thought I was crazy for suggesting a refinance on our first home. If people want to have their first home paid off a lot of the time, you can use the income from your other properties to start paying back what you've taken out of that first home. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was tax implications, right? Because you said you do that first home, do it up, fix it up, then what do? You can sell it or you can refinance. So if you sell it, you're in Canada anyways, you're paying capital gains.
Unless you live there.
Yeah, unless you live there and you're moving to a bigger home, but eventually you're going to get sick of house hacking in every home that you live in, unless you have a high tolerance for that sort of thing. Right? Yeah, this is what I love about the States, where they've got that 1031 exchange, where with investment properties, as long as you roll it back into another investment property, you don't pay any.
Yeah, I think we're going to be doing a remote podcast when you move to the States. So it sounds like you're going there.
It's really real estate is much more favorable there. But I just want to point out on a refinance, right? As long as you're using, in Canada, as long as you're using that money to buy another property, you're not paying taxes, right? It's tax exempt. So if you use it for personal stuff, yeah, then technically you should be paying taxes on that. But if you're putting it into another business investment, so this could be like your second property, you refinance it, put it into another one, you don't pay any tax on that. So you get to keep the asset, you get to use a substantial amount of the equity growth that is in there to get another place, but you don't have to sell it. You don't have to get rid of it to get the next one. And that's the beauty of the BRRRR method.
It's like
that repeat,
the goose and
keep doing it.
Golden eggs, right? You don't have to kill the goose that keeps giving you the golden eggs. You can, yeah. No, well, maybe let's wrap it up there. And I think we got a couple more episodes out of this. But yeah, thanks again for listening. This is our little mini series on trying to help young people learn about accessing the real estate market, what are their options and what they can do. So hopefully you glean something from that. Until next time, steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.